So thank you, Dr. Tariq, for that amazing moderation, and to our doctors that joined the session. We thank you for that informative lectures. We move forward to the poster presentation, concluding session 5. We encourage all the delegates to join us for the poster presentation, so cast your votes as well. And we look forward to a major discussion once the posters are done, and we will take come back after the CASA posters are nominated and voted for. So thank you.
Dear colleagues, I'd like to thank the organizer for the opportunity to give this presentation, and also to thank all of you attending in front of your screens. The meaning and connotation of word stigma has varied considerably over the centuries. Originally, the Greek word meant the mark of pointed instrument. Through the centuries, word stigma acquire various meanings, including a religious one. The root of contemporary perspective of stigma can be traced to Erving Goffman's seminal essay published in 1963, his classic book, Stigma, Notes on the Management of Spoiled Identity, the work that attracted and inspired research to delve into the stigma phenomenon. Later on, theory and research began to challenge traditional perspectives on how stigma affects self-esteem, academic performance, health, and the entire life. One of the curious features of literature concerning stigma is the variability that exists in the definition of the concept. Goffman himself defines stigma as an attribute that extensively discredits an individual, reducing him or her from a whole and usual person to tinted, discounted one. Jones describes stigma as a mark that links a person to undesirable characteristic. Stafford and Scott proposed that stigma is a characteristic of person that is contrary to a norm of a social unit, where a norm is defined as a shared belief that a person ought to behave in a certain way at a certain time. Crocker et al. Indicate that stigmatized individuals possess or are believed to possess some attribute or characteristic that conveys a social identity that is devalued in particular social contexts. And Links and Fallon reviewed stigma and mental illness. They add the component of discrimination to definition of Jones. Stigmatization refers to the disapproval of individuals' characteristic or belief. Stigma is a powerful tool for social control and might be used to exclude or pressure individuals or groups with certain characteristics. Stigmatized people are often subject to rejection and social exclusion. In its extreme form, stigma turns into discrimination which directly violates people's civil and human rights. The medical field recognizes several diseases, the sufferers of which are stigmatized. While leprosy is perhaps the oldest stigmatized health condition, a mental health-related stigma is often grounded in stereotypes that persons with mental health issues are dangerous and unpredictable, cannot be controlled, and should be ashamed. Research has proven that stigma can affect human health through multiple pathways. The downstream micro-level psychological mechanism bears on health in several ways. It can affect mental health through stress responses, including chronic stress that alter individuals' allostatic load. Additionally, individuals who experience devaluation may cope with such experience by engaging in risky behavior, such as substance abuse, with a negative health effect. Upstream, structural level mechanisms involve the unequal distribution of resources. Stigmatizing ideas motivate and justify discriminatory treatment, with both direct and indirect health consequences. For instance, when healthcare professionals hold stigmatizing belief, they are more likely to provide unequal medical treatment. Defining stigma in the relationship of interrelated components has paramount importance not only for better understanding of this phenomenon, but also for more effective battle with it. Four main components have to be considered, commencing with distinguishing and labeling differences and consequent association with a negative attribute. Important characteristic of stigma is the separation of us from them, and reaching to the status loss and discrimination. The following are the mechanisms by which stigma affect the stigmatizer. The negative outcome of stigmatization can be seen in various domains. However, I would like to bring your attention to the human health. Stigma is a fundamental cause of health inequalities because it contributes to unequal distribution of resources and power through multiple pathways. Consequently, understanding how groups become less stigmatized can improve the well-being of individuals and population. Stigma does great harm to both the individual and society as a whole. Recent research reported that addressing stigma in clinical setting is critical to ensuring the delivery of high-quality, patient-centered care. Fighting stigma, reducing destigmatization, and numerous similar titles can be found, all of them aiming, if not entirely, at least partially to decrease the negative effect of this phenomenon. An overview of various strategies for stigma reduction might be summarized as the following. Intervention on different levels have to be performed, starting from intrapersonal and interpersonal, going through the community and to government structural level. All of them have their own characteristic and requirement that should be satisfied in order to reach the desired outcome. Discussing stigma reduction, two major points need consideration. As stigma is a social construct and not an attribute of individual, we must not expect persons affected alone to carry the burden of activism against stigma, or that educating the general public and increasing their tolerance is enough. Secondly, patients are not passive participants in the stigma reduction process. They can take an active role in this, and that program should be more patient-centered. Research indicated that intervention should be multi-targeted and oriented at multi-level. In fact, all the levels above mentioned have to be included in order to achieve the best outcome. Fighting stigma in particular groups such as mental health patients require knowledge on both micro and macro level in society, as well as good knowledge of entire stigmatization phenomenon. Stigmatized people with mental health problems might differ in certain aspects from stigmatized one with other health conditions, but certainly there is something in common. They all experience health-related stigma, and all are stigmatized. A proper and successful strategy will need a multidisciplinary team involving all specialties and professionals that interact with stigmatized people. Researchers, groups, institutions, and organizations have created programs and guidelines. Intervention on inter- and interpersonal, institutional, community, and government level have been utilized. Despite that, thousands of people around the world are experiencing on daily basis the severe burden of being stigmatized. Thank you very much for your attention. I'd like to wish you a fruitful meeting. Be safe, you and your family. Thank you very much.
Hello. Good day to everyone. My name is Dr. Cheryl Scaria. I'm a psychiatric resident here too at Al-Amal Psychiatric Hospital in Dubai. On this platform, I would be presenting a poster which looks at the variations in the demographics of the admissions to our hospital, which is a tertiary psychiatric care center during the COVID-19 pandemic period. I was part of the team looking at the nature, the demographics, as well as the presentations, variabilities between 2019 and 2020. Our team included Dr. Amina Turki, Dr. Motasim, Dr. Rita, Dr. Maduna, Dr. Mohammad Adil, and myself. We undertook this study because we found a change in the type of admissions. There was an increase in the rate as well as the nature of the admissions coming in through the emergency as well as from the outpatient department. We went and looked at certain literatures. We tried to find out if this was a common trend, but we could not find a similar finding anywhere around the world. In fact, two specific studies which looked into the similar aspects was one undertaken in Italy and the other undertaken in Australia. Surprisingly, both of them showed the rates of admission to be lesser compared to previous years. But clearly we were finding an increase. Initially we found that there was up to 78% increase in the admissions to our wards. So we went ahead to look into what was so special about these admissions, what we could find in these admissions. Our aim was to observe the impact of COVID-19 on the demographics of the psychiatric admissions to a tertiary psychiatric hospital, and with a specific objective of finding the age categories, the ethnicity, the gender, the marital and the employment status of patients who required inpatient care between March 11th, 2020 to June 11, 2020, compared to a similar timeline in 2019. Our study design was a retrospective observational study comparing the demographics of the psychiatric admissions. We included all the admissions. We did not exclude any admissions. Our ethical approval came from our hospital's research committee as well as from Mohab's research ethical committee. The findings, the initial findings that we saw was quite interesting. We did not find much of a variation in the age and the gender. There was a 5% increase in the married and separated individuals requiring patient care from 2019 to 2020. We looked at the age and we found that in both the years, 20 to 40 years was the major presentation of the admission. And despite the fact that COVID-19 is more prone to cause problems in the older, as is being told, we did not find that translating to the mental health of these age category people. We did not see much of a variation in the gender as well, although there was a very minimal increase in female presentations. We went ahead to look at the ethnicity, and that is where we found a marked difference. While in 2019, we had 60% of our admissions to be nationals, UAE nationals, we found that reversing in 2020 with up to 74% of the patients being from the expat category. We found that among the expat category in 2019, 34% belonged to the South Asian ethnicity as compared to 15% in 2019. What we also found was that the Indians and Pakistanis included the bulk of the South Asian population. Another group which came up was the Sub-Saharan Africans, with countries like Nigeria and Uganda coming in with a significant number of admissions as well, which previously had not seen any admissions to award in 2019. What was surprising to us was that the Northern Africans, countries like Egypt and some parts of Middle Eastern countries like Jordan, Syria, did not show any increase despite a general increase in the number of admissions. We further looked at the employment status, which again surprised us because in 2019, we found that majority of admissions were unemployed, while in 2020, it reversed with more employed patients getting admitted. We looked at the marital status and that showed not much variation, but when we compared the two, we found that while in 2019, 23% of the single employed were admitted, it rose to 50% in 2020, as well as the married employed also increased from 35% to 51%. What we expect from this research and its findings is to open avenues to lead in the preparation of mental health response for a similar global crisis, especially in this part, as it's quite essential to be aware of the impact of stress and social isolations on a multicultural community such as ours. I would want to conclude saying that the demand for, as we saw that there was clearly an increase in the demand for tertiary psychiatric care, we saw that the variabilities such as the ethnicity as well as employment status of patients had changed, while there was no major difference in the sex or the age or the marital status of patients. We identified that such a difference in certain categories requiring coming into contact with mental health facilities is probably the impact of high stress with low social support, which is quite well identified in immigrant employees, young immigrant workers in this part of the world. We expect to get the statistical analysis by the end of this year, and we would want to share the results on with the world through some publications when possible. Thank you for listening.
Welcome back, and we have an exciting stage of the conference. It is the poster presentation. I would like to now welcome Dr. Dimitri to open this discussion. Over to you, Dr. Dimitri.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'd like once again to thank the organizer. I have just a very short message for those of you who are interested from stigmatization. Myself, I am not a psychiatrist, but a dermatologist who is interested from psychodermatology, relatively new emerging subspecialty. For the last few years, I attend a few conferences and meetings in both dermatology and psychiatry, and I found that there's a good number of colleagues interested from those problems of stigmatization. But I also found that everybody is somehow interested on the its own field, in own area. My personal belief that to help of solving this problem, first of all, we have to study the problem in general, in its roots, and that requires multidisciplinary, really multidisciplinary team, not just from physicians from different specialty, but from more specialists dealing with that problem. And first of all, sociologists and social psychologists to be the one, because they are with most experience of the field of stigmatization in general. And after that, medical specialty from all fields. Only after studying the problem in general with all details, after that, I believe we can go in specific problem in any different area, either psychiatry, dermatology, sociology, or whatever. Thank you very much. Again, I wish you a fruitful conference. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Dimitri, for that. So we thank you, Dr. Dimitri.
Thank you.
Most welcome.